Hello, everybody. It's Heather and Deb here, and this is episode 26 of Reluctantly Woo Woo. And us woo woo is all the things that we weren't brought up believing or learning about or knowing anything about. Things that people would call like alternative and sometimes even new age things. And out of the conservative world for sure, and things that we were reluctant to believe in, but realized as we started experiencing them that, oh, there's something to this. This stuff kind of works. And so we explore all the things that seem a bit woo woo. And today is not so woo woo at all because we're going to talk about something practical so people have trouble with, and that is boundaries. And so if you are one that struggles with boundaries and setting boundaries, just hit a like, hit a love, let us know that this is something that is, a topic for you. Because I know with all my clients that I talk about, it's always a thing. So,
right.
Yeah.
And I will say sometimes you're not even aware that you struggle with boundaries. So keep listening and maybe something will resonate and you'll be like, oh, I didn't know that I'm not that good at setting boundaries.
Yeah. So we're going to talk today. This is going to be a two-parter. We're going to talk about like what boundaries are, like what the benefits of them are, and the different types of boundaries. And then we'll talk about how to set good boundaries on our next one. So you'll have to stay tuned for that part. We're going to leave you hanging today. Okay. So what are boundaries and how do they impact your life? So personal boundaries are they're things that define you as an individual. Like they determine how you're going to experience life, how you contribute, and they contribute to your level of happiness. Our boundaries I can't talk today, Deb. Our boundaries, right? We have boundaries in our physical life, our mental, our sexual, time, energy, and spiritual, right? So we understand time boundaries, like I work from this time to this time. I think that's really clear. But boundaries are essentially like guidelines that you can create to show others how to treat you. That's the hard part for everybody.
Seriously. Right. I mean, I think we've all probably heard that you teach people how to treat you, that little adage. Mm-hmm. It's true. It's true.
Yeah. And boundaries are challenging because, well, if I set this boundary, what if this person doesn't like me anymore? And we're more concerned about being liked by that other person or loved or respected or whatever than we are that of liking, loving, respecting ourselves. So the benefits of setting boundaries is one, that it gives you better self-esteem. You're just naturally going to, like when you pay attention to your needs more and you know what you want, like you're going to feel better about who you are as a person. But it's this catch-22, right? Because you have to feel good about yourself to set boundaries, and setting boundaries allows you to feel better about yourself. So it's a both and kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But standing up for yourself increases your self-confidence, that you have to have a little bit of self-confidence to stand up for yourself to begin with, right?
Yeah. Interesting paradox, but baby steps in both directions, I think.
Exactly. Yeah. It gives you a greater level of compassion, right? Because when you set boundaries, right? Like a lot of times people think, well, if I set boundaries, it's being rude, right? But setting boundaries is being kind and respectful of the other person. Right? And it allows you then to have compassion, not only for yourself, but for other people's situations. Right? This is like if you get on the phone with somebody and like, you can tell they have no boundaries of time and they don't check in with you to see, if you want to keep talking or whatever. And you're just like, oh my gosh. Right. And when somebody has compassion and they understand like, oh, you have a life. Like I have compassion that you don't need to, like, you have other things to do besides talk on the phone with me. Right? Like it allows you to connect with somebody so much more when you actually set boundaries. Mm-hmm. It also allows you to conserve emotional energy, which is a big one.
That's huge.
Right? Yeah. When you're spending time being angry and resentful, what do you have energy for? Nothing. Right? Setting up boundaries like puts those things in advance so that you don't have to be angry and resentful. And if somebody pushes past your boundary, all you have to do is like, oh, I have data. This person doesn't like this boundary. Maybe I don't want to have this person in my life anymore, or on a limited basis. Like it doesn't have to be black or white. Like, nope, bust them out, like taking them out of your life. It's like
Right.
limited interaction. Right? Setting boundaries also deepens your connection to your personal power and your agency. It gives you like agency over your life, which really gives you peace.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. I think, what that immediately brings up for me, I'm sure you're going to get there, is don't say yes to something you don't want to do. Don't say yes when you mean no. And if you feel that you said yes to something and now you're resentful, you kind of have no one to blame but yourself, but you can also do better next time. Next time, choose differently.
Right. But it's like all these reasons and people like why I'm saying yes, even though I don't want to do it. Like, again, I don't want to be rejected. I don't want them to not like me. I don't want to lose love. I don't want to feel like I'm going to end up with nothing in my life. Like all of those things are what the drivers to like, I don't want to say yes, but I'm going to. Right? My thing, and I'm sure I've probably told you this, but I love this like reframe. I was at a conference one time, like years ago, so 2012, and they had these like breakout rooms, and you know how to have all these other booths and all these people talking to you about like their programs, right? And I'd already was in a program, and I noticed this trend as I was going through, and these people were like, "Oh, but if you don't do this program that I have, you're not serious about your change and your growth in that area." And everybody was saying that, and I realized finally, I was like, I am not saying no to your program. I'm saying yes to what I've already committed to.
Yes. Right? Yeah.
And that for most people is like, what? Right? Because like, I'm so terrible at saying no. And I'm like, you don't have to say no. And you're like, what do you mean? Let me just say yes to what you've already committed to.
Right.
When you can keep that frame also, it's like, oh, that frees you up so much.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I think even if the thing that you've already committed to is sitting on your couch with a book, right? That's a big one for me. When I had to realize like what's a good amount of social interaction for me in a given week. And if someone asks me to do something and I feel that like, oh, I really should, they're going to be blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you know what? I can just say, no, I already have a prior commitment. I don't have to explain to them that commitment is with my couch. It's just as valid as a commitment, because if you had already had plans with another friend, you would easily say, oh, sorry, I really wish I could, but I already made plans to hang out with Heather, or, I have to do this thing. You can set a boundary that is strictly for yourself to do what you need to do to nourish yourself.
Yeah. So then that leads into the next point of the benefits of boundaries is it allows you to do the space to do the things that nourish you. Right? Like when you say yes to the things that you really want to say yes to, right, your time's going to be so much more enjoyable. There's compromise all the time. Like I don't necessarily, my boyfriend lives 30 minutes away. I don't love driving down there at all. So sometimes I'm like, no, I don't want to go. I don't want to. And I do it because the greater picture of the relationship is a yes for me.
Right.
So it's not like, oh, you're not setting your boundary. Well, I do. There are plenty of times that I do it. I'm like, no, I'm not coming down there. You want to see me, come up here, right? But when you look at like the greater picture, it's being able to say what is it that I'm really going after, right? So what am I saying yes to?
Right. That's a good segue into why sometimes boundaries might be a little more fluid than others.
Yeah. Yeah. So the boundaries all like what comes into play with our boundaries are our beliefs, our emotions, our intuition, and our self-esteem, as we've mentioned so many times, right? It's what you believe about yourself and whether or not you can set boundaries. So they're shaped by our personality, right? Whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, that makes a big difference. Right? Because extroverts generally want to please other people, right? And they're just like, who else is doing it? It will be fun, right? And they don't really care. Where introverts are like, oh my gosh, what are they gonna think? What are they like? But I really want to be by themselves. So those two different personalities are gonna have different struggles with boundaries. Right? They're also shaped by your family and your heritage. Right? I mean, think about okay, like here's an easy, obvious, well, maybe not so obvious, but like the Italian culture and food, right? Like if Nana puts food in front of you and you don't want to eat it, like you're totally shamed because it's like, no, eat, 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 right? And so you grow up in a culture like that where like you're made to feel guilty if you don't do the things you don't want to do, right? That's going to constantly carry you through your life.
Mm-hmm.
I was at my friend's the other day, and they have a 2-year-old. And he's like my little buddy, and I was leaving, and she told him to give me, come give me a hug goodbye. And then she's like, I really don't want to be that person that like, tells him to have some kind of physical affection if he doesn't want to.
Yeah.
And he loves me, and he'll run to me and give me a hug and stuff. But she's like just noticing and being aware of like how she's, pushing, not pushing, but like,
yes.
It's a mom, you understand, like
totally, yeah. I was aware of that one with as a mom too, and my strategy was more be like, do you want to give a hug? And if the answer is no, the answer is no. I mean, most grown adults, if they're going to be offended, well, I'd rather offend you than teach my kid that they have to hug somebody they don't want to hug.
Yeah.
Especially as a girl, I don't know. I think that's an important thing to establish with all kids for sure. But when you're the mom of a girl, I think you're a little more hyper aware of that.
And I think that a lot of us didn't grow up that way.
Right.
And you were told to give affection when you didn't want to,
mm-hmm.
right? So even though you felt bad, you're like, still did it. And that carries into your lifetime, adult lifetime of, I need to, like, I need to, give affection to this man, or a woman, right? In a way that I don't want to, but I'm supposed to.
I I know several of my girlfriends and we've had these conversations about, when you get yourself in a situation and you can tell a guy is expecting some sort of affection, we shall call it, from you. And sometimes it's easier to just concede than to say, no, I don't want to. And that's so not healthy.
Yeah. And that's a whole other topic.
Yeah, that's a big one. We'll just dance right by that for now.
Yeah, because you're like, it's easier for me to just say yes than to get the crap beat out of me or to get, like so much other stuff. But yeah. And yeah, we can go on and on about that for a long time. We won't. We're not ignoring it. We just know that's a bigger conversation.
Yes, exactly. Not where we were going with this particular topic.
Yeah. So we have our personality, we have our family and our heritage, we have the culture, and then also like the region where you live. Like all of these things contribute to like what for you think is an appropriate boundary, right? Because somebody in the Northeast, right, is very different than somebody in the South, right? In just as far as boundaries and how people speak to one another and all those things. Like it's like, well, yeah, it's okay for me to just snap at somebody. Like I'm not being rude. Like if you're from New York, New Jersey area, like you're like, I'm not being rude. Where like in the South, like that's totally unacceptable. But they're like, well, I don't understand, right? Yeah. So there's a lot of things that come into play. So when we talk about the different types of boundaries, right, there are 4 main types of boundaries. So we have a soft boundary. And a soft boundary is when a person tends to merge with other people's boundaries. Like they don't really have a clear sense of their own boundaries. So somebody else with soft boundaries can be easily, somebody with soft boundaries can be easily manipulated. And this is often, you see this in cases with teens and peer pressure, right? Like you're just not sure. And so you're like, okay, I'll just do that. And it just like things just flow. And there's no like divination between like yes, no, all that kind of stuff. And then we have rigid boundaries. Okay? Rigid boundaries are the extreme where they're so closed and so walled off that nobody can get close to them, like either physically or emotionally. And they have these rigid boundaries because they had a previous bad experience. And so then they're like, nope, like everything is just a no, right? And it's because they want to protect themselves, right? So it's a positive intention. It just comes across in a way that's, not so great because it just closes off every single thing. And so rigid boundaries can be appropriate in some situations, like the situation we were just talking about, as far as like, physical touch and that kind of stuff. Right? But across the board, like they don't make for a fun life at all. Right? And then we have spongy boundaries. And spongy boundaries is a combination between soft and rigid boundaries. And this is like when somebody's unsure of who to let in and who to keep out. So they have like a lot of inconsistencies. Okay? It seems like they don't trust themselves. They're always looking for outside to like tell them what to do. And they can be rigid when it doesn't serve them, or soft when it doesn't serve them either. And then the last type of boundary is flexible boundary. And flexible boundary is similar to rigid, but more control because there's some flexibility. Okay? This is someone who can decide like who to let in, what to keep out. And they can be resistant to emotional pressure and manipulation, which is a good thing. And they can be difficult to exploit, which is also a really good thing. Right? And so somebody with flexible boundaries, they're really clear about what they want and what they expect and what they want to let in and what they want to keep out. Like they really understand, like, this is the kind of house I am, and these are the kind of guests that are allowed in my house. Period.
Right.
Where somebody with like spongy boundaries are like, I don't know, I'm a this, I'm a that, I don't know, and everybody can come in, and like, they're just not clear on any of that kind of stuff. So those all make sense.
Yeah, I think they do. I also think, I know that, I mean, I guess as part of what our conversation is if you identify that you might need some different structure for your boundaries, but I also think as you learn through life, you test boundaries. You test like, okay, I'm going to try putting this boundary with this person. And then you realize, okay, maybe that wasn't exactly where I need that to be. Maybe it needs to be a little bit firmer. Maybe I need to lay back on that one a little bit. So I think it's a process, you learn as you experiment with it. Because I know for me personally, like one that seems to come up is, for example, like I become friends with coworkers or friends with clients, and then that becomes like, okay, now we're in the friend space, so it becomes a little iffy, and then I end up feeling like, okay, I got to dial this back a little bit because I don't want you to think that you can call me at all hours of the night, Right. So I tend to kind of like vacillate sometimes on some of those as a relationship with someone changes, maybe that the boundaries that you assert with them might change. I think though, always coming back to that idea of if I truly deeply love myself, what's the right decision here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's the question for most people, and that we'll leave everybody with right now is, if I am as someone like who loves myself, what would the boundary be in this situation? Because they change all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and it's not that the boundaries change all the time, but everything is a case by case situation.
Right.
So many different things can make a difference, and like you can have a similar situation, but there's intention and like relationships with people and all these different things, that shift and change how you're going to put a boundary up. With one person that could be different with another person, but it'll still come down to like, if somebody loves myself, right? But that's the key, is that most people are like, yeah, I don't love myself, so
Right.
I'm gonna let all these things in because I need their love because I don't have love for myself. That's the work to do. When we talk, next, on our next one about how to set boundaries, right? This is when we'll get into some of the woo-woo stuff, right? Because like that's some of the stuff that's needed in order to be in a place where we can love and accept ourselves. Because, just to sit here and say, I love myself, I love myself, I love myself, like, most people are like, no, that's BS. Don't love myself, right? And there's like energetic work that needs to be done to get us in a place where they, more love and are connected to themselves. So yeah, so we'll leave it at that.
Yes.
Different boundaries, the benefits of boundaries, and let us know if you have any questions, just that we can answer on the next one, because we know that this is a big topic, and we can cover it in two sessions or 2 calls or whatever, podcast, whatever we want to call this, but it's a topic that you can go on for months and months about.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's not exactly cut and dried.
Not at all. So let us know if you have any questions, and then we'll be back next week to talk about how to set great boundaries, and what are the things that, like, the clues that that you're like throwing up excuses, for not creating boundaries. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Awesome.
All right.
Okay. Have a good day, night, whatever, whenever you're listening to this, and we'll talk to you all later.
All right. Thanks.